Happy New Year and welcome to Season 2 of Just One Q. I'm Dr. Melissa Horne, a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert and advocate. In this podcast, I chat with industry experts about the latest scientific trends related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Each week, I ask just one burning question tied to current events. Our goal is to leave you with the tools you need to drive change in your own life, both personally and professionally. 2020 revolutionized the workplace. The ongoing global COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact how we work. And people leaders across the globe have also had to reckon with the fact that many racialized and other marginalized employees continue to experience widespread discrimination and oppression. And perhaps for many organizations has been the realization that investing in DEI initiatives are no longer nice to haves, but critical to the success of their business moving forward. This is true across all industries and sectors, including and perhaps especially important for the legal profession. It's no secret that the legal profession in Canada continues to suffer from a lack of diversity, despite the fact that lawyers continue to represent an increasingly diverse population. But knowing where to start and what initiatives to invest in so that they make the highest impact can feel overwhelming. How do we move from good intentions to consequential actions? So for today's Burning Q, I'm asking, what is the one thing that legal practitioners can do to make diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority this year? And to answer today's questions, I'm joined by Wade Poziomka. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show, Melissa.
So Wade is a partner at Ross and McBride, LLP. He regularly represents employees and employers in human rights matters in Ontario and federally. He obtained his law degrees from the University of Toronto and Cornell University. So Wade, as we head into 2021 in a lockdown as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, I know you've done extensive work with both employees and employers from a human rights perspective in relation to the pandemic. What's one thing that legal professionals need to focus on to make DEI a priority this year, given where we find ourselves?
I think, yeah, that's certainly right. The pandemic is exacerbating these issues. So I think companies and organizations that didn't have policies in place to begin with are really struggling now because things have, as we talked about, have exacerbated. But so I would encourage those employers, and I think my colleagues are doing the same in the legal profession, having policies in place is really important. Yeah. But we all know that policies on their own don't mean anything if they sit in a drawer and you look at them once a year. And so I think it's really important that employers are thinking about, maybe in a cost-effective way because financially they're struggling, but how do we take those policies and what those policies are designed to get at, which is real inclusion and equity and diversity. Most employers, I would say almost all employers, want to have a diverse workplace.
Yeah.
They want to have a welcoming workplace. They don't have the tools to do it, or they think a policy is going to fix it and they don't recognize that there needs to be more. And so certainly training and programs such as the one that you offer would be great for employers to take advantage of, because yours is a constant reminder of diversity and equity issues in real life scenarios. And I think that's so important because I've done this for 10 years now from the human rights side. And I've seen lots of settlements where my employee clients have asked that the employers agree to training. And they do training, and a year later, I get another employee from that organization. Nothing's changed. And so it's really important that the legal professionals, lawyers and paralegals, when you're looking at resolving things for clients, think about something that actually makes sense. Maybe it's a little bit more costly. From my perspective, it's all around the same ballpark. Think about something that's going to work for your client and encourage that. Don't just agree to any trainer or something that might just be, a quick half-hour virtual session and that's it. Think about things that will matter in the long run for your clients.
Yeah, I often think about, when I think about DEI, I think about the people that you have to have in place and the people that need to be on board. So your people leaders need to be on board with diversity. Then you need to have the policies that speak to your organization's mission and values and that live out equality and inclusion. And then it's really about practices. And those are the day-to-day things or the monthly things or the quarterly actions that bring the policies to life, that bring them, to bear so that they don't just sit in a shelf or in a drawer. That's how I think about it. But because you can have a policy, but if it's not being implemented through various practices, then it really isn't doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think what I would also say here is that lawyers, so the question was around what can legal professionals do? And I think from our perspective as lawyers, we can be giving clients advice that fit into their culture. So not just pure legal advice. From my perspective, a lawyer's role is more than simply knowing and reading the law. Our mandate is to represent our clients, but the best legal advice does it in a way that promotes equity, diversity, and inclusion. So it's not about what can you do, it's about what should you do. And I too many times lawyers step back and think, oh, that's an HR professional's role and not that of a lawyer. And for me, especially in the pandemic, I picked up the phone and I proactively called my employer clients and I said, how is this affecting your business? What are you thinking of doing to protect yourself financially? And I heard from them some of their thoughts, and I helped guide them to a way that might fit with what I know is the culture that they want to have, because I've worked with them for a number of years.
Yeah.
So that includes things. I'll give you just a quick example. So if you need to reduce your workforce to save a bit of money, you can lay an employee off. And if you lay that employee off, they're going to get 55% of their income on unemployment insurance.
Right.
In other, up to a maximum. So in other words, they're going to take a 45% loss. But what you could do is you could lay two employees off, have each of them work 50% of the time, and have them be laid off 50% of the time. And there's a work share program through the government which can give a top up, which can give them 90% of their income. So instead of one employee losing 45, two are losing 10 each. So there's things like that you can do that shows a commitment to your workforce, but achieves your goals. You're still eliminating one full-time position, but you're telling our workforce, we're in a pandemic, this is impacting us, but we also recognize it's impacting you. And rather than just taking the quick answer, we're looking at this and we're concerned about your financial viability, your ability to pay your bills, which are often paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
And we're going to implement things in your interest as well. So I think when you're looking at your culture, it's really important not just to look at what you can do, it's important to look at what you should do for your employees, because often an employer's interest and the employee's interest will be aligned. But I think for lawyers, you have to take the next step. It can't just be we're up to date on this change in the law. You have to sit and talk to the employer, figure out what they're thinking, and make decisions that work for their culture that fits into that diversity and equity and inclusion framework.
And you're doing that, and you're thinking about this. How do we have other folks, other legal professionals taking that proactive approach?
I think it's just a matter, from my perspective, I get caught up in kind of the flow of things. It's easy to lose sight of what the ultimate goal is. I have a significant number of clients. And ever since COVID hit, employment lawyers, human rights lawyers, we've been very busy. So other lawyers might have taken a bit of a hit in terms of their work, but on our side, it's been crazy busy. And so just stepping back and thinking about what are we trying to achieve here and grounding ourselves in what our mission is. And it's not just to give legal advice and earn money. It's to make a change for our employers. Our employers want to have a certain culture and we can help them achieve that. So just grounding ourselves in that understanding and taking some time to reflect, I think is important, because it's so easy to get caught up in the million things you do every day and lose sight of that. And I think the same goes for employers, right? With their employees, just step back and think about how it's impacting your employees, what kind of organization you want to have. Do your policies actually achieve that? What other work do you have to do? Are you enforcing your policy? Try to put yourself in the employee's shoes and say, if I was looking at this company, yes, they have policies. Are they meaningful? Are they acting on them? Are we getting training? Do we feel included here? Is there a diverse workforce? If not, why not? And what can we do to fix that? So just turning your mind to those things, because I think you mentioned at the outset, employers want to do good work. They often don't know how, or they don't have the time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds, if we're thinking about, we're still in this pandemic, it's ongoing for the foreseeable future. But if we're to really focus in on something that can be done to improve, or that legal professionals can do to improve the workplace, and that employers can do, is to really have that conversation with your lawyers and your legal team, and to say, let's review our policies as we head into this, because there is a lot of uncertainty. But if there's a way that we can continue to move forward together in a way that's going to protect my employees, that's going to preserve my workplace culture, there is actually a really important role that the legal profession can take in preserving workplace and enhancing it in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion.
Yeah, that's most absolutely right, I think. And I think for employers, if you're getting advice from lawyers that are ending you up in litigation, or that you don't feel comfortable with, or you don't think that it's matching your culture, let your lawyer know that. We can change our advice. There's lots of different ways to go in different routes. And once we know what you want to achieve, it's easier for us to give you that advice. So I'd encourage employers to do that. And maybe you have the wrong lawyer and you need to look at a different one, right? Different lawyers suit different organizations, right? There's different styles all across the board. And so I would just encourage employers and employees to make sure they find the right fit for what they want to achieve when they're looking for legal counsel.
And so I want to just circle back one more time to the training, in terms of, if we're looking at how do we live out our values and our preserve diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. So not only investing in making sure that your policies are up to date or that they're proactive in terms of being able to maintain this workplace culture as we continue to move through the pandemic, but that training for clients around diversity, equity, and inclusion could actually help mitigate further litigation down the road, and actually is one tool that the legal profession has in terms of advising their clients.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. I think the training is the most important aspect of any DEI program. When we find ourselves in a scenario, or if you were to give me a scenario now and ask me what I would do, I think I could probably give you a fairly intelligible answer, and it would probably be pretty accurate, and it would be a DEI type answer. But when you find yourself in the grind of everyday life and something happens to you or you're in that situation, you have to respond instantly. You're not thinking, what should I be doing from a human rights framework? So I think having training that puts you into those situations, that forces you to think, okay, this situation occurred to me, you're almost role playing and you're answering, doing that on a regular basis. You're starting to ingrain those responses inside of you. So at least it's going to pop into your mind, maybe this isn't the right thing to do, or there'll be a flag and you can catch yourself. So I think that kind of training, and like I said, this is why I'm doing this podcast, because I have a lot of respect for the training that you offer. And so I think it's that kind of training that's so important for legal professionals to be pushing with clients, to help them actually achieve meaningful change and have it built into their mind when they're in these situations, that this is how I want to respond, or this is what I should be cautious of. I think that's so important.
Yeah, and I think that we don't talk about snippets often on the podcast, but I think you're right. And we mentioned earlier is that a lot of employers and people leaders want to do the right thing, but when they're faced, as you said, with a sort of a new situation, I think human tendency is to freeze and we don't know exactly how to react. So we either don't do anything, or we have this knee-jerk reaction, and it may not happen the way that we want to. But when we practice and have gone through a similar situation through a scenario, then we actually have something that we can go back to and reference in our minds and say, oh, you know what, I did this in the scenario. This is a fairly similar situation. I think I know exactly how I will handle this time. And we just don't have often enough practice. And I think that's the real key, is that inclusion is a skill that needs to be practiced. And a lot of us are out of practice.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think also what I see, so when I'm acting for employers or on the employee side, I see a reluctance from employers to agree to the training. They might agree to it to get the settlement, but they don't really want it. And I think it's a leader's job, especially when I'm on the employer side, when I'm acting for my employers, to tell them, regardless of what happened in this legal case, here's what this person perceived and here's what they experienced. And it doesn't hurt to have the training. It doesn't hurt to be more in tune with law, with DEI protocols, with how you're going to behave in a certain situation, because even though you may not see it, it may be there and it's going to help you have that reflection, and maybe you'll see it afterwards. So I think from a legal professional's perspective, and this is something we don't do enough, work with our employers to make them understand the real benefit of the training, as opposed to just do this to get a settlement.
I think that really brings it all together there, the importance of training and really what legal professionals can do as we move into 2021 to make diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority. I want to thank you, Wade, so much for sharing your expertise, for really having us think a lot more about the role that the legal profession can and does play in diversity, equity, inclusion, and really thinking about how we can move forward throughout the pandemic in a way that's going to improve the lives of employees and businesses in a meaningful way, given the constraints that we do have. So I want to thank everyone who tuned in for joining me on Just One Q. If you have any of your own burning questions, please feel free to reach out to me at hello@learningsnippets.ca or write us a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode. Until next time, I'm Dr. Melissa Horne, and this has been Just One Q. This podcast was brought to you by Learning Snippets. Using highly measurable tools and practices, Learning Snippets will help you build a high-performing, inclusive employee culture at scale. Learn more at learningsnippets.ca.